They told us the Cold War was fought in whispers, that while soldiers stood idle at borders and missiles loomed waiting in their silos, it was information, stolen, twisted, erased, that truly drew the battle lines. But there was another war, one they didn't tell us about. It wasn't fought in Moscow or Berlin. It happened right here, in quiet neighborhoods, on college campuses, in churches, coffee shops, and late-night protest meetings, bringing the front lines to our own streets. The targets? Our very own citizens. It was called Operation Chaos, and it was exactly that. Tonight, we open a file that was never meant to be read. We examine a program buried so deep beneath layers of disinformation, its true scope is still debated by historians, journalists, and former operatives who only speak in half-truths and shadows. What you're about to hear isn't just the story of a surveillance program. It's the story of a nation watching itself rot from the inside out. A hidden campaign waged by the CIA against American citizens under the guise of national security. A web of deception that tangled informants, double agents, unwitting students, and more than a few corpses. This is the story of chaos. And it begins, as so many American nightmares do, in the long, hot summer of 1967. Welcome to Midnight Madness Archive. Summer, 1967. Detroit is burning. Newark is already in ashes. Across the country, tanks roll through neighborhoods that once held backyard barbecues and Sunday school picnics. Helicopters hover over tenement rooftops, spotlights cutting through smoke. Sirens scream, windows shatter, and beneath it all, the slow, unrelenting pulse of America tearing itself apart. The official reports call them race riots. The operatives call them field conditions. In a dim office 3 floors beneath Langley, a young intelligence officer named Julian Kerr is handed his first assignment. The envelope is unmarked. The instructions are verbal. The objective is simple: infiltrate a student group at Columbia University suspected of receiving foreign influence. Translation: the Students for a Democratic Society, the SDS, a leftist organization growing louder and bolder by the week. Julian doesn't ask questions. He was recruited straight from Yale. He speaks 3 languages, reads 4 more, and never looks out of place in a protest crowd. The agency called him clean. No attachments, no family complications, no visible ideology. They thought he was perfect. Within weeks, he was inside the movement. Within months, he was on their planning committees. He shared beers and manifestos. He helped organize sit-ins. He even started dating one of the leaders, a woman named Naomi Vess, sharp-tongued, tireless, and entirely unaware that the man beside her each night was reporting every word she said. But something unexpected began to happen. Julian wasn't just observing anymore. He was being changed. The rhetoric stopped sounding dangerous and started sounding reasonable. And Naomi wasn't just a target. She was brilliant, driven, unshakably honest in a world that lied for a living. Back at Langley, his reports became irregular, vague, hesitant, so they sent a handler to redirect him. And if that failed, they had a contingency plan. Because Julian Kerr wasn't the only one embedded in that movement. He wasn't even the only one at Columbia. And he didn't know that his file had just been flagged. Not as active asset, but as possible liability. The call came at 2:13 a.m., not to Julian, to Naomi. Her apartment phone rang like a gunshot in the stillness. She reached for it groggily, still tangled in the sheets, while Julian sat upright, heart already racing. He watched her face tighten as she listened. She didn't speak, just nodded. Once. Then she hung up, slowly, and looked at him. "That was for you," she said. "They used my name." Julian didn't ask who they were. He already knew. He got dressed in silence. There was no discussion, no argument. He kissed her once, gently, on the forehead, and left without another word. He didn't know it yet, but it would be the last time he'd ever see her. The handler was waiting in the back of a diner in the Bronx. He wore a gray suit, narrow tie, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He had the kind of voice that sounded reasonable even when delivering threats. "I hear you've been busy," the man said, sliding a manila folder across the table. No names, no introduction, just an unspoken hierarchy. Julian opened the folder. Inside were photos, him and Naomi, holding hands, standing at rallies, sitting on apartment steps under the city's smog-filtered sun. Each image was stamped, surveillance, internal ops. Another page, typed, "Subject has demonstrated ideological compromise. Recommend containment or neutralization." He looked up. Neutralization? The handler stirred his coffee. "It's just language. The point is, you're off the leash, but we're still watching the kennel." Julian clenched his jaw. "I haven't compromised anything." "You compromised her," the handler said softly. "You think we didn't know?" Julian stood up. "You should consider yourself lucky," the man added. "We're giving you an out." Julian didn't ask what that meant. He just walked into the night, feeling the noose tightening behind his shadow. He returned to Naomi's apartment the next morning. The door was ajar. No lights, no sound. Inside, everything was gone. Her books, her coats, her journals, even her scent. The drawers were emptied with surgical precision. Her name didn't show up in any phone directory. Her student records had been sealed. To the university, she'd never existed. To the city, she'd vanished. To the agency, she'd been redacted. The weeks that followed were a blur of shadows. Julian stopped reporting in. He changed apartments, twice, paid in cash, watched every face in the subway station, every car in his rearview mirror. He knew the signs. Surveillance was part of his training. But what rattled him most was what he didn't see. No knocks on his door, no tales he could confirm, no sudden confrontations, just emptiness. Like the agency had taken its eyes off him, not because he wasn't dangerous, but because they already knew how the story would end. He still had the key to an agency drop box in Midtown, an old, dead letter slot hidden inside a hollowed-out newspaper vending machine. One day, against his better judgment, he checked it. Inside was a single cassette tape. No label. He played it that night on a reel-to-reel in the basement of a friend's print shop. The tape was badly degraded, static layered over static, but beneath the distortion, he heard two voices, both male, both speaking in code, at first, but midway through the recording, the codes dropped. The voices turned casual, confident. One of them was his own. The other was a man he didn't recognize. But what chilled him wasn't who was speaking. It was what they were talking about. They weren't discussing an assignment. They weren't reviewing surveillance logs. They were talking about Naomi, in detail. What she'd said in private, what she feared, her family, her medical history, her psychological profile. It was all there, like she'd been dissected, like every moment of their relationship had been fed through a machine and analyzed for leverage. Then came something worse. A long silence. Then, "She's useful now, but if she ever starts asking the wrong questions..." A pause. Then Julian's voice, flat and cold. "I'll handle it." He dropped the headphones. He rewound the tape, played it again. The voice was definitely his, but he didn't remember ever saying those words. For 3 days, Julian didn't sleep. He played the tape over and over, looking for inconsistencies in the sound, splices, distortions, audio manipulation. He slowed it down, reversed it. He ran it through borrowed spectral software in a radio repair shop after hours. But there were no anomalies. The voice was his cadence, his rhythm, even the breath between words. He'd said it, but he had no memory of it. That was when he stopped questioning the tape and started questioning himself. He returned to his apartment only to find the locks had been changed. His landlord claimed he'd never heard of a Julian Kerr. He tried to pull his agency credentials, long expired by then, but the badge returned as invalid. Even the serial number. His pay stopped. His storage locker was emptied. His name disappeared from the Langley phone directory. He was still breathing, still walking. But officially, Julian Kerr no longer existed. He went to the only place left that still felt real. A bar on the Lower East Side, half jazz lounge, half cave. The kind of place where men with too many secrets went to vanish into the smoke. It was there he met someone who called herself Roxy. She knew who he was. Before he said a word, she slid a napkin toward him. On it, a spiral, and a single phrase, Project Ashes. He blinked. Roxy smiled. She had the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, but hers didn't need to. The eyes were already laughing at you. You were part of something bigger than chaos, she said. They use chaos to hide the real work. Julian's throat was dry. What work? Roxy tapped her temple. They needed operatives who wouldn't question orders, so they made some. He didn't respond. You ever have blank spots? She asked. Missing time? Headaches after briefings? Vivid dreams that feel like someone else's memories? He said nothing. That's not your paranoia, sweetheart, she whispered. That's your programming peeling off. It was 2:17 a.m. when Julian stood outside the building that wasn't supposed to exist. It had no name, no signage, just a squat, brutalist block of concrete and steel buried beneath a forgotten corner of D.C., the kind of structure built to disappear into bureaucracy. Once a federal records annex, then a Homeland Security sub-office. Now? Nothing. Scrubbed from maps, shuttered in silence. But Roxy had drawn him a map, and Roxy had never been wrong. The side door was still chained shut, rusted solid. But the loading dock had been peeled open long ago, sliced like a surgical wound. He slipped inside. Inside, the building smelled like mildew, dust, and something sour beneath it, chemical rot, long-aged paper, old secrets decomposing in the dark. There were no lights, but the spiral was there, spray-painted on the concrete wall just beyond the security checkpoint. And beneath it, 2 words, Project Ashes. He followed it, down into the basement, then deeper still, past broken elevators, through flood-damaged corridors, down stairwells no longer on blueprints. The silence was unnatural, not empty, expectant. At last, he reached a blast door, massive, steel, marked only by a keypad and a small faded sign. Restricted. MKA, Ashes. No access without override. To his shock, the keypad was active. He hesitated, then typed the only code he remembered. His own CIA personnel number. Access granted. The door hissed open, and the first thing he saw was himself. Row after row of photographs, files and recordings, surveillance, interviews, drug responses, test logs, dozens of psychological profiles, all under his name. Some labeled Julian Kerr, others labeled Subject 12B, some simply said, Prototype. He spent hours reading, maybe days. Time didn't exist down there. Only the sound of his own breath and the soft crackle of yellowing paper. Every file confirmed the same terrifying truth. Julian had never been just an agent. He'd been a subject, from the beginning. They'd selected him as a child, monitored him through adolescence, triggered his recruitment with a fake campus outreach. Even Naomi had been part of it, at least at first, a psychological pairing test. Emotional proximity to the target enhances conditioning. But then something happened. She fell in love with him for real. That hadn't been part of the plan. In the margins of one report, in cold black ink, someone had written, Emotional deviation detected. Recommend full reset. And below that, in red, Chaos no longer sufficient. Transfer to ASHES protocol. That was what the project was really about. Not surveillance, not infiltration, reprogramming, not of enemies, of our own people. They didn't want to observe dissidents. They wanted to build them, create unrest, seed chaos, control both sides of the flame, and if any asset began to crack, To question ashes would burn the evidence. Julian found a final envelope at the bottom of the cabinet. Inside was a photo, not of him, of Naomi, date-stamped 2 weeks ago. She was alive. Somewhere. In the photo, she was walking through a sunlit plaza in what looked like Lisbon, hair shorter, glasses now, a satchel on her shoulder. She looked different, but not afraid. On the back of the photo, someone had written one word: reset. Julian stared at it for a long time. Then he closed the file. The last report in the archive was undated. Its header read, Operation Chaos. Status, dormant, redirected. At the bottom, in fine type, Ashes was never meant to succeed. It was meant to erase what chaos couldn't control. Memory, identity, history. You cannot fight what you can't even remember. Julian left the building before dawn. He didn't take any files. He didn't take the photo. But somewhere inside him, something had changed. A question now burned where certainty used to live. Not, who am I? But, who made me believe I was Julian Kerr at all? Julian Kerr wasn't the only ghost buried in chaos. He was just one name in one folder in a filing cabinet full of records, one controlled fire in a forest full of embers. There are others, many others, and some of them burned far hotter. Federal District Court, Washington, D.C., 1971. A man in the orange jumpsuit sits motionless at the defense table, staring straight ahead. No emotion, no blinking, just the slow, rhythmic tap of his fingers on the wood. Behind him, the room is filled with federal agents, press, and a few civilians brave enough to sit that close to a man accused of blowing up a government building. The prosecutor stands with a stack of photos in his hand, charred steel beams, a bloodied staircase, fragments of a military intelligence emblem. He placed the bomb, the prosecutor says. He built it with precision. He knew the shift change. He timed the detonation to kill exactly one man. But the man in the jumpsuit doesn't react. Not when they say his name, not when they show the carnage, not even when his own wife takes the stand and breaks down crying. His name is Daniel Clay, age 28, Vietnam veteran, Bronze Star, former Special Operations demolitions expert. He returned from the war in '69 and disappeared. No job, no paper trail, just a long, empty space on the timeline. Then on March 17, 1971, he walks into a federal building in downtown Baltimore and plants a directional charge under the stairwell of the Records Division. The blast kills one man, Kenneth Rook, mid-level logistics supervisor, cleared for Project Chaos. When they arrest Clay 2 hours later at a bus stop outside D.C., he doesn't resist. He just asks the same question over and over. Did anyone else get hurt? They find no manifesto, no group affiliation, no explanation, just a blank stare. When asked why he did it, he answers calmly, I don't remember planting the bomb, but I know I had to. The file is marked, authorized eyes only, stamped with the internal code, Chaos Shard 31J, and handwritten beneath it, in red ink, Javelin. The documents aren't official reports. They're notes, personal, messy, scrawled in the margins of forms that were never meant to be kept. They come from someone calling themselves T. There's no full name, no rank, just a title. Behavioral Architect. T's notes follow Daniel Clay's trajectory like breadcrumbs leading toward the fire. September 15, 1970. Subject accepted into pilot PTSD desensitization program. Notes signs of combat guilt and fragmented identity. Ideal baseline. September 29. Nightmares increasing. Introduced visual triggers during dream cycles. Results promising. Began suggestion layering with coded affirmations. Subject unaware of programming. Still believes in therapy narrative. October 10. Contact installed. Rook. Casual conversations logged. Rook mentions file location twice. Was it intentional? October 14. Phase 2 begins. Subject shown, the footage, confused reaction, vomiting, responds to post-event questioning with, "It looked like me, but I wasn't awake." October 21. Phrase, "The records rot the roots." Smell, ammonium nitrate residue. Directive, remove rot. No civilian casualty. Then, nothing. No debrief logs. No closure forms. Just one last scrawled line. Subject completed objective. Wiped clean. Below that is a blank space. Then a single paperclip holding an old Polaroid. It shows Daniel Clay standing in front of a brick wall, staring at the camera. His eyes are empty. Behind him, drawn in chalk, a spiral. The tape recorder clicks on. "This is Agent M, interview with D. Clay, Baltimore Correctional, June 2nd, 1972, beginning log." Clay doesn't speak at first. He sits across from the agent in the prison interview room, hands folded, eyes unfocused. The orange jumpsuit hangs off his frame. He looks thinner now, drained, as if something's been slowly leaking out of him since the day of the bombing. "Can you tell me what you remember about March 17th? Clay blinks, slowly. "It was raining," he says. "That's correct. What else?" "The bus was late. There was a man in a gray coat. He had a spiral on his briefcase." "You're sure?" "No." A pause. "What do you remember about Kenneth Rook?" "He was kind. He gave me cigarettes." "Why did you kill him?" Daniel looks down at his hands. "Because I had to." "Did someone tell you to?" "Number." "But I heard it." "Heard what?" "The phrase, over and over, in the wall, in the drain. The records rot the roots." "Where did you hear that phrase before?" Daniel's eyes shift, just slightly, like something clicked. "The hospital," he says. "Which hospital?" "Not a hospital." "Then what?" "There was a woman. Glasses, red hair. She gave me a pill and said I could leave once I passed the test." "What kind of test?" Daniel leans forward. His voice drops. "I think it already happened." The agent presses play again. "What happened?" Daniel doesn't blink. "The bomb wasn't meant for the building." A pause. "It was meant for me." 3 weeks after that final interrogation, Daniel Clay was found dead in his cell. The report says, heart failure, no signs of struggle, no toxicology anomalies, case closed. But something didn't add up. The prison guards reported that Clay had started humming a tune the day before he died, software repetitive, under his breath. They thought it was a hymn, but one officer, former military, recognized it. A short, repetitive 4-note melody, barely audible, like a lullaby with no lyrics. The same rhythm he'd tapped during his interrogations, the same sequence mentioned in his earlier recordings, and it wasn't just a quirk. That 4-beat rhythm was later identified as a conditioning tone, a sound used in experimental MK Ultra subprograms to implant and reinforce post-hypnotic triggers. It was used to tune subjects before commands were embedded. But Daniel wasn't just receiving commands anymore. He had become a transmitter, a tuning sequence, an audio pattern used in classified comms training. 4 notes, same rhythm as Clay's tapping, the same cadence recorded in every one of his interviews, the same one embedded inaudibly in certain Project Chaos broadcast intercepts from as far back as 1965. The night before he died, Clay carved something into the underside of his metal bunk with a sharpened toothbrush handle. It wasn't words, it wasn't a confession, it was a spiral. Inside the spiral were 4 letters, S-T-A-Y. When his cell was cleared, they found a second item sealed behind the air vent. A cassette tape, unlabeled. It contained a recording, not of Clay's voice, but of Agent M, the man who had interviewed him. On the tape, the agent speaks slowly, almost drowsy. "I've started dreaming in symbols. The spiral shows up on napkins, on my kids' homework. I know it's not real, but I can't stop tracing it. I listened to Clay's interview 5 times. I thought I was analyzing him. I think he was analyzing me." Last night I caught myself tapping that rhythm, the 4-beat. I don't remember learning it, but I can't stop. Then silence, followed by one final phrase. Initiate drift protocol. Phase 2. Subject replication successful. The tape clicks off. Daniel Clay was never meant to survive. He was meant to propagate. His programming wasn't just about planting a bomb. It was about planting an idea, a rhythm, a code, a psychological virus designed to infect anyone who got too close, anyone who studied him, talked to him, interviewed him, listened to his story. He was the test case for a new kind of sleeper agent, one that didn't need conditioning rooms or electric shocks anymore, one that could create more of itself just through exposure. Agent M wasn't his handler. He was the next agent to be awakened. The phrase, "the records rot the roots," it wasn't just meant for Daniel Clay. It was meant for anyone who tried to investigate the truth, including maybe even you.